dear viewers, we meet on Tell Me About Science for a new show. Today we welcome a fabulous scientist from the Pasteur Institute. He is a researcher in the field of the human body. Thank you for welcoming Oliver Johnson.
Hello everyone. Thank you.
Hello Oliver, can you introduce yourself quickly? What are your projects and what are you going to tell us about today?
Hello, I'm Oliver Johnson and I'm a researcher in life sciences and human functioning at the Pasteur Institute in Paris. We are often working on projects in groups of 4 people and I work alongside great scientists. More precisely, we are currently studying the development of a treatment for pulmonary infection. Pulmonary infection are a leading cause of death worldwide, and infection caused by antibiotic-resistant bacteria are steadily increasing. We study how virulent bacteriophages can be used to treat bacterial lung infection. We develop infectious model using clinical isolates. But today, I'm going to tell you, about us. What are we made of? How to explain Thales theory, this thing that makes up man.
Okay, right, thank you. It's a great project. You say that our body is made of cells. Explain to us.
The human being is composed on average of around 100 trillion individual cells. Suffice to say, a lot. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living organism. It's the smallest unit of life and can replicate independently. The study of cell is called cell biology. Cells vary from individual single-cell organisms, bacteria, to multicellular structures, tissues, organs, and organisms, animals, and plants.
As much? So we find cells in every living thing, right?
Indeed, this is one of the 3 principles of cell theory. I will explain that to you after.
Okay, good. You are talking about theory. There must been a lot of research before to form the story, right? Can you tell the story of the cells, research and anecdotes?
Perfectly. It all started in the 1600 when the optical microscope, which was developed by Zacharias Janssen and his son Hans Janssen, appeared. In 1665, the English physicist Robert Hooke described cork and other plant tissues and introduced the term cell in his book Micrographia because the cellulose walls of dead cork cells remind him of the blocks of cells occupied by the monks. He described them as tiny boxes or honeycombs.
It seems to me that he would also have stated that all living things were made of cells, because for him, if plants were made of cells, all living things were too. I'm wrong?
Exactly. Thanks to his researches on onions, euglena, he concluded that every plant had made of cells. And in the 1700s, Anton van Leeuwenhoek used a handmade microscope to observe the form of the pond and discovered single-celled organisms. He called them animalcules. He also observed blood cells from fish, birds, frogs, dogs, and humans. Therefore, it concluded that the cells are found in animals as well as in plants.
Between the Hooke-Leeuwenhoek discoveries and the mid-19th century, very little cell advancements were made because in 19th century, many adopted spontaneous generation, and this was disproved by Louis Pasteur, right?
Yes, To explain to viewers what spontaneous generation is, it's the supposed production of living organism from non-living matter, as inferred from the apparent appearance of life in some supposedly sterile environments. It was above all a very old theory which dates back to antiquity.
Very good explanation, like a good scientist.
Likewise, a little anecdote which is not without importance in the scientific world, there are many tensions and conflicts between Hooke and Newton. They disagreed at all, and Newton, who hated him for his researches and his hypotheses, destroyed all of his portraits. So things, then we never knew what Hooke looked like. It was only afterwards, in the years 1838-1839, that the development of their theory appeared. This is the foundation of cell biology. It is based on three principles. In 1838, German botanist Matthias Schleiden concluded that all plant parts are made of cells.
A year later, in 1839, German physiologist Theodor Schwann, who was a close friend of Schleiden, stated that all animal tissues are composed of cells.
Yes, German physiologist Theodor Schwann and German biologist Matthias Schleiden state that cells are the elementary particles of organisms in both plants and animals, and recognized that some organisms are unicellular and others multicellular. Schleiden's contribution on plants were acknowledged by Schwann as the basis for his comparison of animal and plant structure. They recognize the common features of cells to be the membrane, nucleus, and cell body, and describe them in comparison of various animal and plant tissues.
Schwann and Schleiden were not alone in contributing to this great generalization of natural science. Recognizing that the basic problem was the origin of cells, this early investigator invented a hypothesis of free cell formation, according to which cells developed a new type. The best physical model of the generation of formed bodies then available was crystallization. Even though cells division was observed repeatedly in the decades, the theory of free cell formation lingered throughout most of the 19th century.
However, they considered that cells could reproduce by division. The principle was affirmed in 1855 by a German pathologist and statesman, Rudolf Virchow, after extensive study of cellular pathology, who asserted that whole cells come from cells. To always be the most beautiful, and this in all circumstances. To do sport while always being the most warrior and super beautiful. To be elegant everywhere and all the time, even in night parties. To meet your soulmate, the love of your life. Use your L like hair of W, and thanks to its strong fixing, you will have the privilege of having the life of a princess. Don't hesitate and become the most beautiful and the most incredible of all by WS Spray. You will find it in store in small format to have it everywhere and all the time.
So, the three basic components of the theory cellular are: 1. All organisms are composed of one or more cells. 2. Cell is the basic unit of life in all living things. 3. All cells are produced by the division of pre-existing cells.
Exactly, but there is no modern cell theory.
Can you explain to us, please?
Modern cell theory contains 4 statements in addition to the original cell theory. The cell contains hereditary information, DNA, which is passed on from cell to cell during cell division. All cells are basically the same in chemical composition and metabolic activities. All basic chemical and physiological functions are carried out inside the cells, movement, digestion, etc. Cell activity depends on the activities of subcellular structures within the cell, organelles, nucleus, and plasma membrane.
Tell us, you who are a student or a scientist, is there a science on cells?
Indeed, the basic discovered truth about cells listed in the cell theory are the basics for things such as disease, health, medical research and cures, cancer, vaccine, cloning, and stem cell research.
Amazing to think that the cells that make up our bodies are just as alive as we are. Humans are just an intricately designed community of cells which must together to survive.
As biology has advanced and technology improved, we have examined many different types of cells. Some cells are different to the normal cells that we see in most organisms.
As the striated musk, this is a type of tissue that we use to move our body.
The building blocks of this tissue are muscle fibers, which are similar to cells. They are surrounded by a membrane and are formed by pre-existing cells. However, they are much larger than most animal cells, and instead of having one nucleus, they have many, sometimes hundreds.
So there are several types of cells?
Cells are of two types, prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. A karyotic cell contains a nucleus and prokaryotic do not.
If I understand, we can say that prokaryotes are single-celled organisms, while eukaryotes can be either single cells or multi-cells.
Prokaryotic is a single cell that lacks a membrane-bound nucleus, mitochondria, or any other organelles in the cytoplasm. In that event, cell division occurs mainly by binary fission, like bacteria. Prokaryotic cells were the first form of life on Earth. They are simpler and smaller than eukaryotic cells.
In that event, what about eukaryotic cells?
Eukaryotes have specialized organelles in the cytoplasm, a membrane-bound nucleus enclosing genetic material organized into chromosomes. Their cell division occurs by mitosis and meiosis.
As plants, animals, fungi, protozoa and algae.
Indeed, these cells are larger than a typical prokaryote and can be as much as 1,000 times greater in volume.
If all cells come from pre-existing cells, how can you explain the first cells without spontaneous generation?
Pasteur's experiment can be repeated using modern apparatus. Louis Pasteur performed the famous swan-necked flask experiment to prove the third main point of cell theory. This experiment ultimately disproved the long-standing idea of spontaneous generation. French chemist and microbiologist Louis Pasteur performing a scientific experiment. Pasteur's studies helped establish the principle of biogenesis, the development of new organisms from the reproduction of other organisms.
What type of devices do you use to observe cells?
We use microscopes.
There are 3 different types of microscopes.
Indeed, the one that we usually see are the compound microscopes. These are called light microscopes because they use a light to eliminate the image.
Then there are the scanning electron microscope. You use electron to image a sample with a beam of light and give a 3D image sample coated in gold and image in black and white.
Finally, there are the transmission electron microscope, TEM. Transmission electron microscopes also use electrons, but they can look at very thin or small materials in 2D. The most used is the optical microscopes.
Thank you very much, Oliver. The show is coming to an end. We are happy to have received you, and we hope to see you again in the next interview. This time it will be for you to tell us about your journey and especially what is it all about on the development of the treatment of pulmonary infection. Similarly, it seems that you are going to travel around the world to study cells in other countries. We wish you a good trip and we hope to see you here again in a while so that you can tell us about your trip.
Yes, exactly. I'll tell you all about it. Thank you for having received me, and it will be with great pleasure that I come back. Goodbye!
Hope you enjoyed this program, dear viewers. See you next week for new adventures on Tell Me About Science. Goodbye!